Yes, I think we should.
You can start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good evening, doctors. On behalf of Harmonica, the division of Acumentis, I welcome you all to this Vox webinar. And before I hand over the proceedings to Dr. Juhi Deshpande, a word or two about the company. Let me take great pride in telling that since the pandemic started, COVID 1.0 last year, we have been doing a lot of webinars, and this is our 45th webinar which we are doing. And let me tell you, we have got a great success, and this is the only way where one can remain connected. I must also appreciate Vox because this must be eighth or ninth program with them, with our division Harmonica, and all the programs have been splendid, absolutely. I must also take this opportunity to congratulate my zonal manager North, Mr. Pankaj, who has taken special care in doing the webinars. I have no
True.
hesitation in telling you that
Very true.
absolutely out of the 45 odd webinars we have done, quite a few have happened in North. In fact, 50% are from North and most of them in UP. So a word of appreciation for Pankaj and my special marketing team led by Priyanka, Khushbu, Pratik, who all have worked very much to make all the programs a success. So I quickly introduce the moderator for today's program, Dr. Juhi Deshpande. Dr. Juhi Deshpande is a pass out from Allahabad, MLN Medical College, and of course, she was awarded the best resident. And then she did her senior residentship from MLB Medical College, Jhansi. She is the former assistant professor in Heritage Institute of Medical Sciences, Varanasi. Currently, Dr. Juhi is the assistant professor at GMC PGI Azamgarh, and she has a lot of publications in national and international journals. Dr. Juhi is the winner of award for best paper at UK Africon 2017 and the best poster presentation in UPCAG. So I hand over the proceedings to Dr. Juhi to take over the session from here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Subhajit sir. Very good evening to all of you and namaste. I feel really privileged and honored to be moderating this webinar. The topic of Adnexal Masters, the best approach. And it is a matter of great honor for me to be sharing this screen space amongst the stalwarts of Department of Obs and Gynae societies all over India. In this COVID era, when the whole world seems to have come to a standstill, the responsibility as a healthcare provider, as a doctor, has increased many folds. So has the stress levels increased. So the webinars of this kind not only impart us knowledge, but they also give us a sense of well-being, a belongingness. They give us strength to overcome this difficult time. Life is not about waiting for the storm to pass. It is about learning how to dance in the rain. With these positive thoughts, I would take this honor to invite Dr. Divya Agrawal ma'am, the president of Varanasi Obs and Gynae Society, to give her welcome speech and presidential address. Dr. Divya Agrawal ma'am is MBBS, MS, FIAMS, FICOG, and has done her fellowship in reproductive medicine from Germany and is an IVF specialist. She is director of Ayushman Multi-Speciality Hospital and Morpheus Akriti International IVF Center, Varanasi. She is specialist in gynae, endoscopy, and infertility. She is president of Varanasi Obs and Gynae Society. She's treasurer of Varanasi Menopause Society. She is member of executive committee of UPIFS. She has been the past secretary and treasurer of Varanasi Obs and Gynae Society, and she has presented many papers at many national and state conferences. She has even participated as faculty at various national and state conferences. Over to you, Dr. Divya Agrawal, ma'am.
Thank you, Juhi, for your kind introduction. As Dr. Juhi has already told, this webinars are really the stress busters and they are the mood elevators. So these webinars, when we are doing, and plus we are continuing with our academic, and it is not being stopped because of the COVID. So these webinars are really, really helpful. So respected seniors and dear friends, I welcome you all on behalf of Varanasi Obs and Gynae Society. First of all, it's an honor for me to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Tushar Kar, who is an excellent orator from Cuttack, Odisha. He had been the chairperson of the ICOG, as well as the vice president of FOXI in past, and now he is the candidate for the FOXI presidentship 2022. I wish you all the best, Dr. Tushar, for your presidentship. Dr. Tushar is a dynamic and exuberant personality, and today we are going to be benefited by him at his talk at Edinexcel Masses, the best approach. I also welcome our respected chairpersons, Dr. Sulekha Pandey ma'am, Dr. Anuradha Khanna ma'am, Dr. Madhulika Mohan ma'am, Dr. Archana Shah ma'am, and Dr. Lavina Chaube. They are the shining stars of our Varanasi Obs and Gynae Society. I also welcome the delegates who are taking the keen interest and participating in this webinar. I request them all to put more and more questions in the chat box so that we can have these webinars and we can make this webinar more and more informative and interactive. Today, we are going to have discussion on adnexal masses. Adnexal masses, as we all know, it can occur at any age group of the woman, and its diagnosis vary depending upon the age. Most of the adnexal masses are benign, without symptoms, and they are diagnosed incidentally. However, the ovarian cancer is an adnexal mass with a poor prognosis, so its diagnosis should not be ignored and it should be managed quickly as soon as possible. So the correct differential diagnosis of benign as well as malignant tumor is very important. TBS is the very effective way for the diagnosis of the adnexal masses. The adnexal masses can vary from functional cyst to inflammatory process to endometriosis to benign and the malignant tumor. So, and we all know the laparoscopy remains the gold standard for the management of adnexal masses. So let's begin our session. I welcome you all again. Dr. Juhi, I call you upon for the further proceedings.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your pleasant words. Now I would like to introduce our distinguished chairpersons for today's webinars. Respected Dr. Sulekha Pandey, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am.
Please share this.
Dr. Sulekha Pandey, ma'am, is ex-professor and head of Obs and Gynae Department, Institute of Medical Sciences, BHU, Varanasi. She is ex-professor and head of UCMS, Nepal. She has been awarded with Best Students Award, President of India Silver Medal and Pfizer Gold Medals. She is recipient of INSA Fellowship and has visited Germany. She is trained in maternal and fetal medicine in Hanover Medical School, Germany, Cardiff, UK, and Queen Charlotte Hospital, London. She has been actively participating in community services of WHO, UNICEF, NACO, BPNI, and UPSAC. She has published more than 70 papers in national and international journals and has contributed almost 7 chapters in different books. She has been examiner in more than 15 Indian universities and has been examiner more than 20 times in National Board of Examination. She has also been an inspector in National Board of Examination and Inspector of Medical Council of India. She is an expert of Union Public Commission, New Delhi, Jammu and Kashmir, Madhya Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh. And she has been awarded with the Manishi Ratna 2008 and Kashi Ratna 2010. We are so honored, ma'am, to have you in this webinar.
Thank you very much.
Our next chairperson needs no introduction. She's Professor Dr. Anuradha Khanna, ma'am. She's MD, FAMS, MNAMS, FICOG, FUICC, FUWAI, FICS. She has been professor and ex-head of the Department of Obs and Gynae, the Gynecology Department of IMS BHU. She has been the ex-president of Obs and Gynae Society Varanasi, ex-secretary of IMS Varanasi chapter, founder secretary of Indian Menopause Society Varanasi, organizing secretary of AICOG 2012, chairperson and research committee IMS 2016-17, organizing chairperson of UPCOG 2019, organizing chairperson of IMS Con 2021, and she has been president-elect UP chapter 2021. She has numerous membership.
जाना सीवी
and-
क्यों प्रेजेंट कर देती है? हेलो,
Yes, ma'am.
हाँ,
Ji, ma'am. She has more than 120 publications and national and international chapters in books and delivered many guest lectures. She has also been awarded and has many distinction, DJ Mukherjee Award, International Medical Association.
Juhi, I think it is enough. Please
Yes.
go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am.
We
Thank
will
you so
like to
much,
listen
ma'am.
Dr.
Yes.
Tusharkar, na?
Yes, ma'am.
We
Thank you
know
so
each
much.
other very well. Just mention the name, that is good enough.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Our next chairperson is Dr. Madhulika Mohan Sahai, ma'am. She is MBBS MD Obs and Gynae, KGMC Lucknow, director of Shiva Polyclinic and Endoscopy Center Varanasi, president of Varanasi Obs and Gynae Society 2019-20, and has held various positions in WOGS and IMA. Her area of interest are high-risk obstetrics and adolescent gynecology. Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the webinar. Our next chairperson is Dr. Archana Sa, ma'am. She is director of Sa Maternity and Eye Hospital Private Limited, Varanasi. She has done her MBBS from Emmeline Medical College, Allahabad, and MS from Emmeline Medical College, Allahabad, and has got Best Thesis Award and has specialization in obstetrics, gynecology, and laparoscopy. And she is vice president of Foxy Varanasi Chapter 2015 and president of Foxy Varanasi Chapter 2017. Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Ju. Thank you.
Ma'am, our next chairperson is Dr. Professor Lavina Chaube, ma'am. She is MD, Obs and Gynae, FAMS, FICOG. She is presently consultant in Department of Obs and Gynae, IMS BHU. And she has been the past secretary of WOGS, Foxy 2015-16, past vice president 2019-20, past chairperson of Infectious Disease Committee and Gynec Oncology Committee, past City Council of UPGOI, present advisory board member of WOGS Foxy, and present scientific secretary and Varanasi Chapter Indian Menopause Society. Is present executive committee of UPA GOI, and more. She has presented more than 100 lectures in conferences, scientific and academic meets, and many papers have been published in national and international journals. Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Juhi. Thank you so much.
Now, I'd like to take my privilege and honor to invite Dr. Sulekha Pandey, ma'am, to welcome our distinguished speaker for the evening. Sulekha, ma'am, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Juhi, Mr. Mukherjee, Dr. Vidya, Pankaj, entire Acumentis team. Good afternoon to all the members of Varanasi Obstetrics Society. I'm really thankful to Dr. Vidya Agarwal, Dr. Mamta, and her whole team who has organized such an important webinar in this Corona time. And I wish them all success in the coming year. I welcome Dr. Archana, Dr. Anuradha Khanna, Dr. Dhitu, Dr. Madhulika, Dr. Lavina for their presence. And also I welcome the entire team of Acumentis. It gives me real pleasure to introduce Professor Tushar Garg. He is the professor and HOD of Medical College, Dhaka. He is the candidate for president post Foxy in 2022. I wish him all success. Dr. Tushar Garg has a brilliant academic career. The ICO 2019 and 20. Vice President of Foxy in 2010. Chairperson Policy Oncology, Academic Advisor of Medical College of Cuttack, corresponding editor Foxy. He organized several conferences and was invited as faculty in many national and international conferences. In this, he has contributed several chapters in many textbooks, published many articles in national and international journals. They published two textbooks, Do and Don't, in Ops and Gynae, and Safe Surgical Practice. He is a recipient of awards, Chikitsha Award 2007, Mani Manika Award 2010, then the Harani Dhag Award 2010, Best Medical Publication DC Datta Award 2011, Tarini Prabha Samanna in 2015. Was also given the Fox Original Award 2018. He is going to talk on one of the most important topics, is approach to a case of adnexal mass. This is a very common problem and very useful. It will be a very useful talk for all of us. And let us all join our hands to welcome Dr. Tushar sir and let him deliver this wonderful talk today. And at the end of that, we will be asking him the question. Thank you very much to Dr. Tushar sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I'd like Dr. Tusharkar sir to enrich our knowledge with his talk. Sir, over to you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon to all of you. At the outset, greetings from the land of Lord Jagannath. So almost all faces are known to me, but I must thank Vox Society esteemed members, all the members, and also our Acomentis Harmonica division, especially Subhojit, my good friend, but my respected chairpersons, Pandey ma'am, Anuradha ma'am, so close to us, Madhulika ma'am, Archana ma'am, and Dr. Labina ma'am. So all these, including our Divya president, you see all the members, the faces are so close. I think that I am in Varanasi today. But whatever it may be, you see, after a long gap, we have been again meeting in the form of webinar. And at the outset, I pray Lord Jagannath to give blessings to relieve from this pandemic. You see, so much things taking out so much life, and especially second session. You see, in this time, they are taking young life, and all of us are really concerned for that. And we are praying again, Lord Jagannath, to get relief from this at the quickest time. So in this pandemic, we have taken up this subject, and you have selected a very nice subject, which is almost all of us are dealing, starting from a youngster till the postmenopausal woman. Let's see how we can deal in a better way. That is the purpose of today's discussion or the webinar. Yeah, you can see. I have putting some video for you. Yeah. So you can see. Yes, I think video is not running. Yes. You can see the first video that is of course from our Sushti Hospital, Cuttack. You see, you can see from the picture.
ऊपर में कितना दिन पानी दिए?
Hello.
एक ही दिन, जिस दिन माली के साथ चढ़े थे बस उसी दिन?
No, there is some disturbance, cross connection. Yeah. Okay, okay. So you can see this. Am I audible?
Yeah, yes.
So you can see that this is a case of torsion adnexa, and well, you can just guess the age of the patient. She is a young unmarried girl of 17 years and presented with a pain abdomen. But in contrary, look at it. Look at the other video. Yeah. So this other video you can see, this is a case of young reproductive age group. So what is the intention? The intention is that the torsion can occur even in a young age, young reproductive age, also in the perimenopausal woman. So therefore, torsion in one of the presentation in for a adnexal mass. Disturbance is there. I think screen share has gone.
Yes, sir. You actually have shifted to another window.
Oh, so should I close that? What should I
No,
do?
sir. You can again click on that Zoom. So
Zoom or launch meeting. It's written.
no, sir. You are already in meeting. You can go on that.
What should
You
I
can
do?
see below one icon is there, Zoom.
No, how it came accidentally?
Sir, it is there below. In
Just
your
make
laptop.
a minimize, sir.
Minimize,
you
na? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm doing that.
That
Yeah.
Zoom is already in the background, so you can click on that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh. It's covering up immediately. Yeah. Again, it's coming the previous one, join a meeting, sign in like that.
Yeah,
No,
just,
sir. Sir, you are already in the meeting. You have to just go that below. The
yeah,
task
just
bar is there.
Pratik, oh, there's a join a meeting, sign in. It's again that's a.
Tusharkar, just make a right click and just tap on the this cursor area and just put it down in a minimizer.
Sir, you can close this Zoom.
So.
Sir, it is there in your task bar, in the below bar.
Below bar. Which button?
Zoom icon you can see, sir. Zoom icon.
Zoom icon.
There you will get two options: Zoom meeting and Zoom cloud meeting. So you have to click on the Zoom.
Meeting control is there.
Sir. You can click on that. Sir, you can stop. First, you can stop the share.
Okay.
Then you can able to see that.
Yeah. Then again.
Sir, now you can again the share. You can again share it.
Okay. Yes, said again.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, you have to open that your presentation. First, click on the presentation, then share your screen. Already presentation is open in the background. So you have to just click on the presentation and you can again share your screen. Tushar sir.
Is it shared now?
No, sir.
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible. So just open that presentation and share
It's,
the
it's now open.
Okay, then sir, you can come into the Zoom and share the screen.
Yeah. Is it shared now?
No, sir.
Pratik,
Sir,
I think Pratik, I think first was not closed.
No, sir.
Is it shared now?
Yeah, sir. Started.
Okay.
It's not showing. Sir. Now it is open.
Okay, no? Okay.
Yeah, yes, sir.
But it's not, slide is not moving.
You have to just touch on the arrow. You can just click on the screen also. It will automatically change the slide.
Yeah, it's
Single click.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Is it
Yes,
shared
sir.
now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Is an adnexal mass can be found in females of all ages, which I have already told, starting from fetuses to the elderly. Many times we encounter adnexal mass in the fetuses, even inside the uterine cavity before the delivery. Now it consists of the, what is then adnexal mass? Always that is the mass which presents in the adnexa. What are the adnexa? Adnexa are the ovaries, fallopian tubes, and the uterine ligament. That means all these structures which are possible to be situated in the adnexa area, that is adjacent to the uterus. So the prevalence of the adnexal mass is around 0.17 to 5.9%, and in asymptomatic in around 7.1% to 12% in symptomatic patients only. So majority of the cases are asymptomatic. These masses are frequently accidentally diagnosed and could be both gynecological and non-gynecological. So let's see what is that. So they can represent either a benign or a borderline or a malignant neoplasm, metastatic from the other site at times, like Krukenberg tumor, or a non-neoplastic process. So how to differentiate is extensive and includes either an ovarian mass, tubal mass, extra ovarian or tubal, and non-gynecological origin. So whatever it may be, all these structures nearing to the tube and ovary, they can lead to an adnexal mass. Now, in the reproductive age group, the majority of the adnexal mass are benign, with malignancy found only 7 to 13%. But in premenopausal women, follicular cyst and corpus luteum cyst are the most common adnexal mass. Here you must remember that as a clinician, so majority of the case, they came to us presenting or accidentally diagnosed in the ultrasound as a corpus luteum cyst or a functional, that is lutein cyst, which doesn't require treatment. But the other mass in this group include endometriomas or chocolate cyst of the ovary, polycystic ovaries, tubo-ovarian abscess, and benign neoplasm. Now, how to differential the diagnosis? So what are the differential diagnoses in case of adnexal mass? So this could be ovarian mass, as I have told. That is, I have already told that there could be a functional cyst, that is a lutein cyst, corpus luteum cyst, luteuma of pregnancy, that is theca lutein cyst, especially in case of molar pregnancy, polycystic ovaries, endometriomas, cystadenoma, benign ovarian germ cell tumor, and benign sex cord stromal tumor. So the malignant borderline are epithelial carcinoma, epithelial borderline neoplasm, malignant ovarian germ cell tumor, and malignant sex cord stromal tumor. But coming to the tubal pathology, which may lead to adnexal mass, they could be ectopic pregnancy and hydrosalpinx. We should not forget that ectopic pregnancy is also included under the adnexal mass heading. So the epithelial cancer, at times we get tubal cancer. That can be a malignant counter of the tubal mass. And serous tubular intraepithelial neoplasia. That's, you know, nowadays that stick concept, that serous tubular intraepithelial cancer, by preventing the epithelial ovarian tumor. Nowadays we should do prophylactic bilateral salpingectomy in all benign hysterectomy irrespective of the age. So by that way we can prevent this stick concept, prevent the epithelial tumor of the ovary, that too malignant counterpart. So coming to the extra ovarian and extratubal pathology, that parovarian cyst, many often we come across, especially in the peripubertal age. So they come with a torsion adnexa, and on laparoscopy we found that there is a parovarian cyst or a femoral cyst, paratubal cyst. And uterine leiomyomas, especially pedunculated subserous fibroid, at times with a long stalk, they present with a torsion adnexa. And tubo-ovarian abscess, the commonest cause, as all of us know, that is the genital tuberculosis. Now coming to the metastatic counterpart, usually metastatic endometrial carcinoma, which is extremely rare, but non-gynecological condition, certain condition we should not forget, like just general constipation, appendical abscess, diverticular abscess.
Okay.
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
okay. A bladder diverticula, ureteral diverticula, pelvic kidney, peritoneal cyst, and nerve sheath tumor at times. But you should not forget about appendiceal neoplasm, that is appendiceal carcinoma, very rare, and bowel neoplasm, metastasis, that is from the breast or from the lymphoma, and retroperitoneal sarcoma. And these are very rare, but we, as a clinician, we should have in mind that this may come across very rarely. Now, coming to the malignant neoplasm are uncommon in younger women, but become more frequent as the age advances. In postmenopausal women with adnexal mass, both primary and secondary neoplasm can be considered, along with leiomyomas, ovarian fibromas, and lesions such as tubal or the ovarian abscess. Now, measurement of the serum CA-125 is a useful test for ovarian malignancy, especially in the postmenopausal women with pelvic abscess, which I'll be telling later on the implication of the serum CA-125 for a clinician in view of adnexal mass. Now, initial approach is to determine who requires immediate surgical intervention. So you have to assess the adnexal mass and who can further testing and by the workup. So patient presentation may vary. You must have an annual visit, no complaint, but mass palpated on examination. Many times they tell that, sir, we are not able to know anything. No symptom is there, no pain. no dysuria, urinary symptom, no bowel symptom, no menstrual problem, but still there is a palpated adnexal mass. Now complain of pain, pressure, change in bowel and bladder habit, change and imaging obtained and mass seen, and that's why you diagnose in a later phase. Now pelvic pain or pressure is the most common symptom associated with any adnexal mass. Some present with vaginal bleeding, very rare, and sex cord stromal tumors may be associated with the hormonal changes. Now, patients should be assessed for features that suggest malignancy, and they should undergo a focus evaluation. Whenever you suspect malignancy, the focus should be how to exclude the any neoplasm or the malignant changes. So, workup generally includes a complete physical and pelvic examination. Now, imaging, as you know, all starting from the ultrasound, which I'll be telling in detail. History taking should include risk factor stratification for ovarian, especially Lynch syndrome evaluation. Now, infertility, endometriosis, and post-OCP use prior pregnancy. So, in the history taking, we should be careful for all these factors. Now, physical examination finding, you have to see the size, consistency, and mobility of the mass should be noted. Now, features concerning for the malignancy may be a solid, fixed, irregular, that is the standard or the classical picture of malignancy. Posterior cul-de-sac nodularity whenever you are doing a PV examination, and endometriomas and tubo-ovarian abscess are benign lesion that may be fixed and irregular at times. So you should, especially in the endometriosis, you may find that fixed and that is restricted mobility of the uterus with the adenomyosis and grade 4 pelvic endometriosis. Now, rectovaginal examination is recommended. So rectal mass or stool may indicate rectal is primary, but mass may be presacral tumor at times. So in the PER examination, you can exclude certain lesion, those may be extragenital lesion. Now, how to diagnose that most adnexal mass arise from the ovary? Now, primary goal of diagnostic evaluation is the exclusion of malignancy. So, what are the differential diagnosis I discussed organ-wise? Now, extra-ovarian mass, especially the ectopic pregnancy, tubo-ovarian mass, which I have told, pedunculated fibroid, again I have elaborated, and diverticular abscess, fallopian tube cancer, maybe you may come across those differential diagnoses. But ovarian mass, this may be a functional cyst, endometrioma, fecal uterine cyst, primary neoplasm, and metastatic carcinoma. But the diagnostic evaluation includes thorough history, which I have told in detail, physical examination, imaging with or without laboratory studies, and the ultimate diagnostic tool is histological examination. Now, coming to the history in detail, special attention should be paid to patient's family history, the BRCA, BRCA gene. Now, characteristics of our pain, menstrual history, especially family history of breast or colonic cancer, then more severe or frequent than expected symptoms are more likely to be associated with malignant ovarian masses. So whenever there is a malignant ovarian mass, the symptoms will be aggravated. Now, risk factor of ovarian cancer are nulliparity, history of infertility and or endometriosis, family history of breast, ovarian or colon cancer, as I have told earlier, and postmenopausal women using hormone replacement therapy, HRT, are at increased risk of ovarian cancer. Now, physical examination you must do after the general and the systemic examination, per-abdominal examination. You have to go for a per speculum, PV, and the per rectal examination. Without that, adnexal mass diagnosis is not complete. So, on these three parameters, what you see: size, location, consistency, mobility of the adnexal mass. So, when performed in conjunction with rectal examination under anesthesia, have limited utility both for detection and differentiation of an adnexal mass. So, detection rates as low as 60% have been reported. Now, detection rates are also hampered by obesity. So, in those cases, EUA is required, that is examination under anesthesia is required, especially in unmarried girl. Now, imaging, coming to the diagnosis, what investigations? Most important are ultrasound, MRI, CT scan, PET scan. But TVS has also emerged as the imaging modality because of its widespread availability, tolerability for the patient, and it is cost effective. Now, but UK collaborative trial of ovarian cancer screening have shown that screening involving serum tumor marker, that is CA125, with second line TVS has the highest sensitivity. Look at this, around 89.4% and specificity of 99.8%. So therefore, friends, these two only things, tumor marker CA125 and TVS, get the highest specificity rate among all the modalities of the investigation. Now, the ultrasound should be the first step to characterize the lesion. Now, transabdominal or the TVS allows morphological evaluation, also morphodimensional evaluation and assessment of the mass, and most important by color Doppler vascularization and the growth. Now, observation of the contralateral ovary by these TVS. Now, detection of other malignant signs, as all of us know, that such as the presence of ascites and peritoneal carcinomatosis. So by TVS, we can see that. Even by the transabdominal sonography, some of the projection or papillary projection we can see at times. Now, sonological features in non-pregnant women also valid in pregnancy with an increased risk of malignancy are, we know that what are the malignant, the morphological changes in the ultrasound, that irregular solid tumor which may be multilocular on the ultrasound, irregular masses with more than 10 centimeter. 10 centimeter is the cutoff till today. Now, septa thicker than 2 to 3 millimeter. Presence of more than 3 papillary projection, which I have already told. Now, exuberant blood flow and presence of ascites or peritoneal masses or peritoneal deposits. These features will hint to us a malignant ovarian tumor. Now, high sensitivity and specificity can be obtained by application of the IOTA group. That what is IOTA? International Ovarian Tumor Analysis in ultrasound evaluation of premenopausal and postmenopausal women, where 10 criteria starting from B1, B2, B3, B4, B5 and M1, M2, M3, M4, M5. All these hints, including color Doppler, they will hint towards the whether there is malignancy in a premenopausal or a postmenopausal woman. Now, scoring system such as pelvic mass score, this is very important, suggested by Rossi and colleagues, and the risk of malignant index, all of us know that as a clinician, RMI can be used to determine the likelihood of malignancy. Now, a meta-analysis of various scoring systems revealed a pooled sensitivity and specificity ranging from 86% to 91% and from 68% to 83% respectively. And endometrioma will consist of a round homogeneous fluid filled mass with low level echoes. Whenever there is a low level echoes with a thick septa and with a thick capsule and homogeneous material fluid, it's more towards the endometrioma or the chocolate cyst. Now, mature teratoma will contain hypoechoic components and multiple small homogeneous interfaces. So, hydrosalpinges appear as tubular sonolucent cyst. So, these will hint whether you are dealing towards a benign or a malignant one. Now, MRI and computer tomography, so should be reserved for those in which ultrasound evaluation is insufficient for clinical decision planning. So therefore, the message is that these are the reserved, CT and the MRI are the reserved things whenever you are fail or you suspect higher things than that of a normal. So majority diagnostic can be done by the ultrasound, especially by the TVS. Now, these are useful for characterizing large masses, MRI and CT scan, evaluating their relationship with adjacent structures, differentiating masses appearing to have adnexal location or ultrasound, but actually having a different organ filiation. Also useful when an advanced stage malignant tumor is suspected, requiring the assessment of the retroperitoneum, abdominal pelvic cavity, and lymph nodes. In practice, whenever there is doubt, we are taking help of the MRI or CT scan depending upon the case wise. So it is an individual variation. So there is no current role of PET scan in the evaluation of adnexal masses. I repeat, there is no scope of PET scan for the evaluation, remember, maybe for the further, that is for prognostic investigation, but not for the evaluation investigation. So maximum, in addition to the TVS, we can take the help of the MRI or the CT scan depending upon the gravity of the case. Now, laboratory studies after this imaging, we go for the investigations. What are those? The laboratory studies mainly this is a tumor marker or the serum marker. Complete blood count, CBC, serum electrolyte, you should not forget, urine analysis, fecal occult blood test, liver function test, and renal function test. That means in addition to the normal all these tests, we should not forget a small test, occult blood test for diagnosis of any malignant lesion in the GI tract, which may have a secondary in the adnexal area. But out of all these things, tumor markers play a great role. Now, first is the CA125. So it is elevated in approximately 80% of the women with ovarian cancer. That remember, and which type of ovarian tumor? It is all the time epithelial ovarian tumor. Not in all tumor, but epithelial ovarian tumor. In only 50% of women with stage 1 disease at the time of diagnosis. So therefore, it is not a biochemical marker for a diagnosis, but it is for a prognostic. Or you are giving the treatment. What is the level? What is the level in the second sitting? Third sitting, the patient has come, whether the patient is responding to chemoradiation or the surgical therapy or not. A non-specific marker in endometrial cancer, certain pancreatic cancer, endometriosis, uterine fibroid, and pregnancy. You know that the CA125 released from the mesothelium of all the surfaces, all the viscera lining by the mesothelium. Example, this is the ovaries, the uterine cavity, the mesothelium in the lungs, mesothelium in the heart. So therefore, and also GI tract, whenever there is any lesion in all these viscera, there is increased CA125. So you give a false positive result in those cases. It has both pore sensitivity and pore specificity as a screening test for ovarian cancer, which I have already discussed. Now, in postmenopausal women population with a positive predictive value of 98% and a negative predictive value of 72%. Look at it, the negative value is around 72%. So therefore, in premenopausal patients, CA125 levels have a positive predictive value, especially in the premenopausal women, not in the postmenopausal women. So therefore, it can be taken as a prognostic value, not for a diagnostic value in case of any adnexal mass. Now, how do you evaluate then? So adnexal, first you diagnose, assessment the malignant predictors, which I have already discussed, and imaging will differentiate a benign or malignant. Then you address, and after the planning, you address whether it is a benign or malignant or a torsion, whether you go for a medical therapy or a conservative therapy or a surgical therapy or even the malignant line of treatment. Now, risk of malignant index, which is very important for a practicing clinician like us. So there are two scoring systems exist, RMI1 and RMI2, each of which derives score using ultrasound features, menopausal status, and preoperative CA125 level. So using assays with a normal CA125 being less than 35 international unit per ml according to the following equation. What is that RMI score? That ultrasound score into menopausal score into CA125 in unit per ml. So that gives, let us say that ultrasound features, you see, if you think a postmenopausal woman with multilocular cyst with ascites and serum CA125 level 100 has a RMI score of 4 into 4 into 100. That 4 towards the multilocular cyst for ultrasound and 4 towards the ascites, that which I have told, then 100 you see for the CA125. So it goes that 4 into 4, 1600 score is the RMI. So that gives a prognostic score for the malignant ovarian tumor, especially in the postmenopausal women. Now, coming to the management of this adnexal mass, you can have a medical management to start with. Now, ACOG notes that simple cysts up to 10 centimeter in diameter are almost universal benign and can be safely followed without intervention even in the postmenopausal patient. So therefore, friends, if you remember around 5 to 10 years back, the cutoff diameter of an ovarian cyst was 5 centimeter. Then 2 to 3 years back, it was 7 centimeter. Now, after 2018, it by American College of Obstetrics and ACOG guidelines and universally accepted till 10 centimeter. excluding other features of the malignancy, whether a premenopausal or a postmenopausal woman, we can go for a medical management provided you have excluded the evidence of the malignancy. Then how to address that? To address this type of benign cyst, review has concluded that functional cyst will not regress more quickly with COC when compared to expectant management. Even the studies that RCT, randomized control study, shown that if you use COC in one group and expectant management in other group, the result is same. So therefore, perhaps you have to wait for that. The majority are physiologic or benign tumors that will resolve spontaneously. So it is told that if you exclude the malignancy, if the diameter is less than 10 centimeter, you just have a COC periodical, or you can go for a expectant management depending upon the case and the anxiousness of the patient. Now, according to the SCOG, simple cysts up to 10 centimeter diameter are almost universally benign and can be safely followed without intervention even in postmenopausal women, which I have told. Hormonal contraceptives are often prescribed to suppress ovarian cysts. Now, functional cysts will not regress more quickly with estrogen and progesterone contraceptive therapy when compared to expectant management as by the previous RCT. Now, adnexal masses detected incidentally during routine sonography in pregnancy can also be followed expectantly. The majority are physiologic or benign tumor that will resolve spontaneously as per SCOG guideline. Now, surgical management, if you think, surgical exploration for an adnexal mass may be performed laparoscopically or by laparotomy. The choice of surgical approach depends on the degree of suspicion of malignancy and the patient preference. Now, if there is a low or moderate suspicion of malignancy, a laparoscopic approach is typically used. Now, laparoscopy is associated with shorter recovery and decreased perioperative morbidity compared to laparotomy. Now, laparoscopy is clearly superior to laparotomy for inspection of diaphragm and visible peritoneal surfaces because the magnification is 10 times and you can see the undersurface diagram, liver undersurface. But even the laparotomy, you can have a tactile sensation, but you cannot visualize, very difficult to visualize those spaces. Now, the surgical technique used must minimize the potential for tumor disruption or dissemination. Most important is dissemination. Hello? Yeah? Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay.
You can continue.
Yeah. If malignancy is suspected, oophorectomy is required rather than ovarian cystectomy. Patient with early stage ovarian cancer, that is no malignant cells in ascites or peritoneal cytology, benefit from removal of adnexal mass intact since opening the masses in a more advanced stage and adversely affect prognosis. If a laparoscopy approach is used, the ovary can be placed in a tissue recovery bag. Specimen is too large to remove through the existing incision. Cyst fluid may be aspirated, but the collapsed cyst should not be disrupted or the incision may be enlarged. For premenopausal patient, ovarian cystectomy is reasonable if preoperative suspicion of malignancy is low or excluded. The mass appears benign intraoperatively and there is no evidence of metastatic disease. In those cases, you can go for a conservative laparoscopy. Now, it has been shown that there is less adverse effect with the laparoscopy, less post-operative pain, shorter stay in hospital, smaller readmission rates, and better panoramic vision. Potential malignant tumors should be carefully excluded from laparoscopy option because in those cases, you should not be conservative for laparoscopy. You can just to start with go for a staging laparotomy. This is performed by the use of transvaginal ultrasound combined wherever possible with Doppler and 3D ultrasound. It should be emphasized though that in large ovarian cysts more than 10 centimeter, TVS might be limited in visualizing the entire cyst so that TAS and pelvic MRI has a role in those cases. Now, various laparoscopy procedures, starting from I must describe or I must mention those things, that is cystectomy, cyst wall biopsy only, aspiration of the cyst, oophorectomy and salpingo-oophorectomy, adhesiolysis, drainage of the hydrosalpinx, salpingostomy, segmental or distal salpingectomy. So this is a cafeteria choice depending upon the age, depending on the disease, and depending upon the personal or the individual variation. We have to address the adnexal mass, which procedure is fitting for that woman. Now, specific data have supported the concept, and the laparoscopic approach for treating adnexal mass is now considered the preferred treatment. As Madam has already pointed out, it is the gold standard for a adnexal mass. Now, therefore, laparoscopy surgery should be given more and more promotion in lieu of proving to be extremely advantageous and minimally invasive. Always we should go for a laparoscopy. Rather later on, if you require, you can go convert for a laparotomy in this after discussing with the patient. Now, laparoscopy is the preferred technique for oophorectomy or a cystectomy because it is associated with a smaller scar, faster recovery, lower cost, and lower frequency of postoperative adhesion formation than laparotomy. The laparoscopy approach is reasonable for patients who is having preoperative evaluation suggest a benign disease. Now, these patients include those with probable dermoids, endometriomas, physiological cysts that have not resolved with conservative management or are associated with acute symptoms. So these are the candidates where you can straightway go for a laparoscopic approach. Now, cysts that are complex should be removed, not fenestrated. That is the message again, given the possibility of malignancy and high recurrence rate. So therefore, whenever there is some suspicion, you should go for a oophorectomy instead of a cystectomy or a fenestration. Now, a solid adnexal mass that is small enough to be removed, intact, colpotomy or via laparoscopic bag can be managed laparoscopically. So solid masses also can be mobilized laparoscopically and then removed through a mini laparotomy incision or extending the lateral pore in the laparoscopy wound or a morcellated inside a specimen bag. Now, the management of adnexal mass in premenopausal women, what is the algorithm? That whenever there is an adnexal mass, so size is less than 10 centimeter, mobile, cystic, unilateral, no evidence of ascites. So observe 4 to 6 weeks while attempting suppression with oral, that is COC, contraceptive pill. So mass disappears or becomes smaller and follow-up is required, that is clinically. Mass persists or increase in size, or the size is more than below 10 centimeters, solid fixed bilateral ascites present, you go for a surgical exploration or a surgical, that is staging laparotomy. Now, management in postmenopausal women, how to manage? The management completely differs because many common diagnoses found in postmenopausal women like endometrioma or ectopic pregnancy can be excluded in postmenopausal women, and because there is greater chance of malignancy in especially this age group. Now, evaluation should include TVS and CA125, as I have told, RMI, and most pelvic masses will require surgery. Now, if abnormal uterine bleeding, that is AUB, is there, you do a TVS and endometrial lining thickening and endometrial biopsy, especially diagnostic histoscopy or histoscopy guided endometrial biopsy should be done. Now, to rule out gastric and colon cancer, upper and GI endoscopy should be performed in patient in addition to occult blood test. Now, management differs in postmenopausal patient definitely than that of premenopausal. A cyst greater than 3 centimeter in diameter can be evaluated laparoscopically. Look at this again recommendation that 10 centimeter in a premenopausal woman, if it is more than 3 centimeter and that is symptomatic pain abdomen, that flatulence and discomfort abdomen, you can go for a diagnostic laparoscopy. Symptomatic patient with an ultrasound, suspicious mass and elevated CA125 should be referred for a surgical evaluation. Now, for the algorithm for a postmenopausal woman, adnexal mass, so you detect an ovarian cyst. This is asymptomatic in a postmenopausal woman, normal gynecological examination, normal pap smear, normal CA125, simple unilateral cyst on ultrasound. What you do? Cyst less or equal to 3 centimeter, followed by ultrasound and serum CA125 and serum CA125 determination. Cyst more than 3 centimeter, laparoscopy inspection of pelvis and abdomen. No evidence of malignancy, bilateral oophorectomy, peritoneal cytology and follow-up. But evidence of malignancy, frozen section diagnosis, surgical staging if malignant. If there is no scope of frozen biopsy, you can go for a imprint cytology then and there. But if it is symptomatic, clinical lesion, elevated serum CA-125 or non-simple cyst on ultrasound. So what you do, we go for a laparotomy, bilateral oophorectomy, frozen section diagnosis, surgical staging. So as per the malignant protocol, you have to deal accordingly. Now, the surgical management, as I have told from the beginning, that if cyst larger than 10 centimeter and those with suspicious for malignancy required surgical exploration. Finding on laparotomy that are concerning for malignancy, all of us know that as a clinician, surface ovarian excrescences, especially papillary projection, positive for malignant implants. You do an imprint cytology or a frozen biopsy. So totally modality of surgical management differs then and there in the city. Now metastatic implants visualized during laparoscopy survey in the upper abdomen and anterior abdominal, you should not hesitate. You should convert for a laparotomy then there, that too for a surgical laparotomy midline incision, and it should be a liberal one. Now advantage of laparoscopy, I have told that the pelvic and abdominal anatomy appears magnified, that is 10 times by laparoscope, allowing precise diagnosis and treatment of the disease adjacent to vital organs, blood vessels and nerve structure. You can do definitive treatment that's limited. Where is the ureter? Where is the vessels? So that you can go for even a radical one. Additional benefits of laparoscopy approach I have discussed: minimize bleeding from small vessels afforded by pneumoperitoneum, because pneumoperitoneum per se cause the physiological hemostasis. Elimination of large abdominal incision, less adhesion formation postoperatively, early ambulation and faster recovery, shorter hospital stay and less cost to the patient and the hospital. Now, retrieval of adnexal mass, this is very important. How to retrieve or a delivery of the mass? So there are 3 or 4 options with us. You can use endobag, we can go for a coldotomy or extents of the lateral port. You can see here that majority of the cases, whenever there is a parasumen and without previous surgery, we get the pouch of Douglas very clearly. And preferably, we do a coldotomy in the pouch of Douglas and try to deliver the things. Even a cyst like this, even a dormant cyst also, without spillage. So we put it there, do a coldotomy, aspirate it through the pouch of Douglas through the vaginal route, then take it out without any chance of dissemination in the abdominal cavity. You will be astonished to know, in all the ruptured ectopic cases, whenever there is a parasumen, I do a coldotomy and a natural drain for at least 24 hours. I don't close that wound. Automatically, that no need of giving a drain, and it goes per se. So here you can see that through the coldotomy, we are removing such a big cyst after doing the aspiration or a cut, that, and all the contents including the semi-solid things will come out through the laparotomy instead of extending the lateral port or the secondary port. But out of this, endobag is the best. But in our practice, we have been habituated with the coldotomy, so that routinely we do it. Now, laparoscopy management of adnexal mass, you can see. Yes, this is the algorithm. So either you can go for a functional cyst you detect, or a organic. Either of the two will come across after the evaluation by the clinical examination, investigation, imaging and biochemical markers. You just differentiate whether it is a functional or a organic one. If it is a functional, you have an expectant management in the form of COC, or only expectant treatment you give and evaluate after 3 months. If it is an organic one, a preoperative workup, ultrasound I told, Doppler is a must, that to TVS with the tumor markers. If there is no suspicion, you go for a laparoscopy cystectomy, and that too if it is more than 10 centimeter. Then preoperative decision for surgery. So if you go for a conservative, I have told that 5 centimeter, or that instead of 5 centimeter, it should be 10 centimeter, and removal of the cyst is required whenever it is more than 10 centimeter. If you suspect any lesion, you go for a diagnostic laparoscopy and peritoneal cytology. If it is an extra ovarian suspicion sign, then midline laparotomy, that is surgical laparotomy. Ovarian suspicion sign, you can frozen bag into the endoscopic bag, and if it is a benign one, only do a cystectomy. If it is a malignant, by the frozen biopsy, you go for a midline incision and the surgical staging and the laparotomy, and as per the guidelines, you go for the dealing of the malignant adnexal mass. Now, ovarian remnant syndrome, it is a very peculiar case. You see, this ovarian remnant syndrome or residual ovarian syndrome is defined as the persistence of functional ovarian tissue after oophorectomy. This is the exact definition. But in our practice, what happens? We are doing a hysterectomy for a benign cause. We are doing a NDVH. We are doing a TLH and abdominal hysterectomy also. We are conserving the ovary. But later on sometime, this ovary forms a adnexal mass. This adnexal mass is known as ovarian remnant syndrome or residual ovarian syndrome. These can be dealt best way if it is a benign one by the laparoscopic approach, and it was reported as early as 1992. Now, laparoscopic management of ovarian remnant syndrome is feasible and safe in the hands of experienced surgeon. If you look, this surgery, this case was mine. I did an NDBS around 20 years back, and now she presented with this ovarian remnant syndrome or residual ovarian syndrome. The first thing I remembered that ureter. Look at this. I am localizing the ureter. So to once you get the ureter, inspect the ureter, avoid the ureter, and go laterally from the lateral to the medial. That is another trick. Not from the medial or center to the lateral side. Always come from the lateral pelvic wall to the center, that is to the rectal side, and avoid the ureter by identifying exact the course of the ureter. Despite objection to the use of minimal invasive approaches like laparoscopy in residual ovarian syndrome, case series have reported excellent outcome after laparoscopic management. I have got also personal case series of the residual ovarian syndrome. This is one of them which I showed in the video. Now, the borderline or low malignant potential tumors, laparoscopically assisted hysterectomy for the management of ovarian tumor was reported in 1992. That time LFH, you remember Hari-Rich was there, but now it is almost replaced by TLH. Now, laparoscopy staging in borderline ovarian tumors has become common. So you can identify by the laparoscopy in a better way for a borderline ovarian tumor than that of a laparotomy. Traditionally, staging of early ovarian cancer had been performed via laparotomy. That is evidence that in hands of experienced laparoscopic surgeon of early ovarian cancer is comparably safe and efficient with similar outcome as that of a laparotomy. Now, advanced stage invasive and recurrent ovarian cancers, laparoscopy can be used to effectively treat ovarian, primary peritoneal, fallopian tube malignancies as a triage tool for resectability, second look evaluation for cytoreduction. So therefore, friends, laparoscopy has also a role in advanced cancer, especially in the ovarian, peritoneal and fallopian tube malignancy. In which way? For the resection, second look evaluation, definitely laparoscopy is better than the laparotomy, and for the cytoreduction, if you don't want to go for a complete resection of the tumor. Now, protocol for laparoscopy management in an advanced ovarian cancer, preoperative suspicion for advanced ovarian cancer, abdominal pelvic mass with ascites and omental cake. What you do? Preoperative assess, take the history, physical examination, tumor markers, imaging studies, then whether eligible for surgery. To start with, you evaluate, yes, she is eligible for surgery. Operative laparoscopy with biopsy to confirm Mullerian origin, whether it is a Mullerian or extramullerian. Assess for ability to optimally debulk. If you are able to debulk totally or optimally, then yes. What you do? Assess appropriate surgical approach, whether you go for a laparoscopy, laparotomy, or combined laparoscopy, laparotomy, that is convert from a laparoscopy to laparotomy and postoperative chemotherapy. If she is not eligible for surgery, paracentesis or CT guided biopsy to confirm Mullerian origin, neoadjuvant chemotherapy, then achieve the clinical response. No clinical response, then experimental protocol, or you can go for a interval cytoreduction depending upon the case response. Now, proportion of adnexal masses detected throughout pregnancy, that prevalence of adnexal mass in pregnancy is estimated around 0.1 to 8.8%. This is a neglected one, especially adnexal mass during pregnancy. Many of the clinician, obstetrician we get at times. Most cases are diagnosed in the first trimester. Why? Because it gets a space for the you see rotation, or gets case is that the torsion. Now in the first trimester, incidence is maximum 21 to 75%. Second trimester 10 to 44%. Third trimester 4 to 22%, and postpartum 7%. Though this literature says it is less, but in our clinical practice, most often we find in the first trimester, in the postpartum period, because we get an empty space in the pelvis during first trimester in the postpartum period. Now, mostly asymptomatic, being diagnosed as ultrasound or surgical findings, found in about 0.3% of cases during cesarean section. 31 to 70% cases will resolve spontaneously. Remember, whenever there is a case, you have to counsel the patient. If at all anything in the form of rupture or acute abdomen or torsion, will deal accordingly. Masses that persist throughout pregnancy tend to be displaced upwardly out of the pelvic cavity as the uterus increases in the size. Now, that may be incarcerated in the Douglas pouch throughout pregnancy, that may also be responsible for labor dystocia by obstructing the descent of the presenting fetal part. So therefore, the interpretation of the tumor markers in pregnant women requires caution, since they may be increased during certain stages of pregnancy, like some oncofetal gene, alpha-fetoprotein, SCG, and CA125, which are involved in biological function associated with development, differentiation, and fetal maturation. So therefore, these tumor markers, especially beta SCG, CA125, and alpha-fetoprotein, are increased percent in pregnancy. This may give a false positive report. So therefore, with an adnexal mass in pregnancy, we should not be carried out by value of these three tumor markers. The main interest of tumor marker here seems to be the differentiation between primary and the secondary adnexal tumors, the possibility to monitor their levels to evaluate the therapeutic response and the risk of relapse. Now, the frequency of complication of adnexal mass in pregnancy, torsion I have told up to 27%, rupture 5%, malignancy 10%, abortion 6%, and preterm delivery up to 10%. So therefore, friends, maximum torsion can occur with pregnancy and an adnexal mass. Now, the type of surgical approach may be laparotomy or a laparoscopy. But the advantage of laparoscopy, here I can say that laparoscopy is also safe in pregnancy. How? I'll be telling one by one. Now, lower operative pain, minor bleeding, early ambulation, reducing the risk of thromboembolic events, early resumption of bowel transit, shorter hospital stay like normal non-pregnant laparoscopy, faster return to activities of daily living, lower risk of surgical wound infection, and less uterine manipulation with a consecutively theoretical lower risk of preterm delivery. But some concern about a laparoscopic approach in pregnancy have been raised. What are those? High intravaginal pressure may compromise placental perfusion. So therefore, it may cause intrauterine growth retardation or preterm labor. Maternal conversion of carbon dioxide into carbonic acid can result in fetal acidosis. So therefore, fetal death. Pregnant uterus may be injured during insertion of Veress needle or trocars if you are not careful. So these are the dangers you must carry out while doing a laparoscopy during a pregnancy with adnexal mass. The Society of American Gastroenterology and Endoscopy Surgeon stated that laparoscopy can be safely performed in any trimester of pregnancy. So what are those? In those cases, that some technical recommendation for performing, laparoscopy in pregnancy women includes: patient must be positioned in left lateral position to minimize inferior vena cava compression. Initial access to the abdominal cavity can be safely performed by open surgery, that is Hassan technique. So you can go for a Hassan technique, that instead of laparoscopy directly introduction of the 10 mm Veress. So with a Veress needle or by optical trocar, as long as the location takes into account the uterine fundal height and previous incision. Now, carbon dioxide insufflation with 10 to 50 millimeter pressure is safe, but intraoperative carbon dioxide monitoring by capnography is recommended. Routinely, we are not monitoring by capnography. So therefore, friends, in addition to the Hassan technology, left lateral position to minimize the inferior vena compression, so the capnography should be used routinely. Pneumatic compression devices are recommended in intra and postoperative period as well as early postoperative ambulation for venous thromboembolism prophylaxis. So friends, again, to prevent this thromboembolism prophylaxis, so what you do, you use the pneumatic compression devices. Tocolytics should not be used prophylactically. I again repeat that tocolytics should not be used, because you see why? Because it should be considered only post-operatively in the presence of preterm labor sign. It should not be prophylactic one, only it should be curative or the signs of the preterm contraction is there. So friends, lastly covering this pregnancy with adnexal mass, to start with, which is the best approach in non-pregnant, premenopausal, postmenopausal, and starting from fetus, even that also. The idea is that every new idea is a joke until one achieves it, and every new thought is silly until one believes it. So therefore, friends, especially in the pregnancy, now the laparoscopy has changed how to deal, especially adnexal mass in pregnancy, with this modified laparoscopy method. So every method is a new one. So friends, perhaps I have justified for the topic that adnexal mass is the best approach. Thank you very much. Again, thanks all the members of our box, and especially Akumentis, Harmonica division, and my good friend Subhajit and entire team for this. Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tushar, for covering every aspect of adnexal mass. I would like to only add a few points. One is, once in a while, we find the mother brings an ultrasound, pregnant women, the fetus having an adnexal mass, which may be as big as 2 centimeters. What to do? Mostly it is benign because of the influence, hormonal influence of the mother. So we should only watch, and after the delivery, we should follow up and don't jump and don't make a panic that your child is having an ovarian tumor. Next thing which I would like to add, many a times we find that after simple hysterectomy, abdominal hysterectomy or simple hysterectomy, in younger age group for benign conditions, the patient comes with an ultrasound. Maybe she has some symptom like lower abdominal pain, dyspareunia, or some pelvic condition syndrome. She brings a picture, ultrasound picture, that I have an adnexal mass. So in this condition also, don't get too panic. You can follow up the patient and you can do the marker studies, and you can go for CT, MRI, and also Doppler blood flow. And just reassure, in a study it has been seen that post-hysterectomy adnexal mass in a childbearing age group, majority, about 44%, they are benign. And you follow up the patient, and if at all the patient is symptomatic, you can go for surgical removal. And mostly 44% they subside by themselves if you follow up, and about 50% when surgical intervention has been done and removed, they were found benign. So basically you have covered, and I think these points, 2 points we always come across, should be taken into account. So the most important thing in evaluating a case of adnexal mass is a proper history examination, grayscale ultrasound, don't go for bigger ones, grayscale transvaginal, transabdominal, complement with Doppler blood flow, MRI, CT scan, and of course, 125 has got a prognostic value for follow-up of the case, but it is not diagnostic. But in a women, post-menopausal women with an adnexal mass comes to you and if CA125 is more than 200 units, a high suspicion of malignancy should be taken into account. So, with this, again, I want to stress that history clinical examination, grayscale ultrasound, CA125 are very important. And then if she is in childbearing age group or reproductive or premenopausal age group, we have to consider if she is coming symptoms. So the tubo-ovarian axis and the ectopic pregnancy should be taken into account. And in a post-hysterectomy woman, if she comes with an adnexal mass, we must think and we must rule out this malignancy. Nowadays, there are so many other markers, important tumor markers have come, and there are advanced imaging techniques, contrast CT, spectral Doppler, and MRI. Then another important thing which I want to, is in India, if a lady with childbearing age group comes with an adnexal mass, you have to do a genetic evaluation. And if she is BRCA positive, you have to do a surgical interference. If she has completed her childbearing age group, so genetic evaluation is very important. And nowadays, immunohistochemistry is also advancing. So these few points, I'd like to congratulate you that you have covered such a wide, extensive topic, including the management in the pregnancy, that wonderfully you have completed. Another thing is, if there is a twisted ovarian and on laparotomy, you have to previously study the Doppler blood flow. And if the blood flow is maintained, even though if it is necrotic, must preserve in a younger woman because the ovary will come up in subsequent days. So thank you very much. Thank you the entire team of Varanasi Society and all the chairpersons who are present and all the viewers for such a wonderful webinar.
Thank you, ma'am. Pandey ma'am,
Thank you,
Anuradha
ma'am.
ma'am, Madhulika ma'am, Divya ma'am.
I'm going to say something, Dr.
Yes,
Tushar.
ma'am.
Yeah, yeah.
Anuradha Khanna is
Okay,
speaking.
Anuradha ma'am. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Anuradha ma'am,
excellent,
welcome.
it is excellent presentation.
Ma'am.
We all enjoyed it. Only thing I will like to add some point that you have mentioned about RMI in 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Nowadays, there are RMI 1, 2, 3, 4 also.
Yeah.
And there is also Roma index, that is risk of ovarian malignancy algorithm, in which the markers is CA125 and HE4. Why it is important? Because this is very good marker for premenopausal women, for which CA125 is not that good. And if we add HE4 in it, then it is a better marker. So nowadays, we are also following Roma index, and that is the risk assessment for especially premenopausal. It is good for postmenopausal also. Besides this, if you are seeing any ovarian tumor which is having cystic areas more, then CA125 is not of much help. Then we should go for CEA and CA119. They are better marker than CA125. We will add CEA and CA19. Then it will be have better outcome so that we will not miss any cases. Especially you have very beautifully mentioned about the borderline tumor. So borderline tumor is not that easy to be diagnosed, but some vascular malformations which are there and ecogenic content which are there, they make it that, but not much of the tumor markers that make it that it may be borderline tumor. But one has to remember, even after that we have removed it, there is a chance of metastasis, and that will not be borderline. That will be full metastasis of malignancy. That should be in our mind. And while we are operating, we have to assess her demand for managing borderline tumor. And this is something very important. For regarding the benign conditions, you have mentioned very nicely how to take care of twisted ovarian and tumor. One, I will like to mention you a case, twisted ovarian with pregnancy.
Yeah.
That was a real emergency. I don't do much of the operative laparoscopy. So I did with a laparotomy only, and it is there. And we have to be very careful in first and second trimester. I have also operated endometrioma with pregnancy. That how I think it was a corpus luteum cyst which grown like that. I don't know how, but it was 10 centimeter. I have operated a case with 20 weeks of pregnancy with 20 centimeter of adnexal mass.
Oh.
And to me, it looks like in Doppler, it is a malignant tumor. And of course, as you mentioned, that during pregnancy, it is very difficult to say about tumor markers, what will be the value, we cannot judge. Anyhow, I did a midline laparotomy and I have taken out that ovarian tumor, and that looked to me as a malignant. Then other side ovary also I have seen, that was also slightly bulky at a point. I take a wedge from that ovary also. So that main tumor was, it was a pseudo-mucinous cyst adenocarcinoma. And the opposite ovary, which I had taken the wedge, that was a borderline malignancy. And that woman was having one child. So I said, okay, you will have the second child. She has SVD previous. So second time she has again spontaneous vaginal delivery. Then she came to me, madam, what to do about that? So I followed her for 1 year. There was no growth. And also I've done malignancy CA125 also for her satisfaction. There was normal value. Then I said, you conceive further. And while she was conceiving further, I said, better you have 2 or 3, whatever you want. The first baby developed leukemia, the first baby, and she died. So now she has left only one baby. Luckily, she had a second baby. And then at the age of, say, 38, she came to me, madam, I am very much scared. Kindly remove my that ovary also. So I said, I got convinced with her that why not? Because she has long way to go and she can take HRT. So I'm saying like this, that each and every case is important. It has got different follow-up, different presentation, and we have to keep our mind open. And young girls, also you have mentioned about the germ cell tumors, and they are also to be beautifully investigated. And about regarding laparoscopic surgery versus laparotomy, it is, I think, the surgeon's skill. I don't mind doing laparotomies. I am a good surgeon and my cases are very well, no hernias, no dehiscence. If you take proper care, there is no harm in laparotomy. If you are trained, it is well and good. If you are not trained, it is also well and good. And as you said, the ureteric injury is in re-operations of remnant ovarian, and in the cases of followed by after hysterectomy, the stuck type of ovary, it is there. So we have to take proper care. And if you lift the ovary, whatever the adnexal remnant or adnexal mass, then you will be get a line which will be away from the ovary. So many more chairpersons are there. These are the few comments from my side. Thank you very much. Thank you, Divya.
Correct.
Thank you, Dr. Sir, Dr. Anuradha Khanna ma'am and Dr. Sulekha ma'am for nicely concluding and giving the summaries. I'd like Dr. Madhulika ma'am to put some throw some light on this topic.
Yes, Juhi. Thank you, Juhi, for inviting me. Dr. Tushar, your talk was very informative and it was an excellent talk and we enjoyed it too much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And our seniors have told so many things, added so many things. I want to say that you have very nicely elaborated and it was a very good talk regarding the approach to diagnosis and management, especially depending upon the age, the premenopausal and postmenopausal age group. And it was very nicely and very well elaborated by you. And there is the role of, I want to emphasize the role of history taking, especially the family history, history of this ovarian or breast cancer in close relative or first or second degree of relations. And therefore, we can consider the BRCA1 and BRCA2 this mutants, and we can, in selected cases, that can also be add and help in our diagnosis and management. And you have very nicely elaborated the role of laparoscopy in selective cases. And I will not like to say much. Really, we enjoyed, and thanks a lot. And I will also like to thank our President, Dr. Divya Agarwal, and Secretary, Dr.
Thank
Mamta.
you, Madhulika ma'am. Thank you, Madhulika ma'am, for,
Thank you, ma'am.
sharing and yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'd like Dr. Archana ma'am to further add on and give her view regarding the approach to adnexal masses.
Thank you, Dr. Tushar. We really enjoyed your presentation. And I must thank Dr. Anuradha for sharing her practical advices with the different cases she has dealt with, and her experience is worth sharing. And I want to discuss a case which I saw yesterday evening. That patient took MTP kit without any doctor's advice on 20th of April last month. And she came on 1st of May with slight pain and bleeding. And ultrasound was done, the scan was normal. There were no remnants in the uterus. The adnexa was perfectly normal. And today she came with ectopic pregnancy. The last evening's ultrasound report was that they reported a hemorrhagic cyst in the ovary. So I just kept on conservative treatment, but the pain increased this morning, and the ultrasound was repeated at Karoli Diagnostic, and she then came with ruptured left tubal pregnancy. So the things by ultrasound, can we differentiate between blood and cyst? What is the role of hemorrhagic cyst? Can we differentiate between blood and fluid by ultrasound? How can we?
Yeah. Actually, if you see the consistency of the blood and the fluid is having low specific gravity than that of the blood. Ideally, what happens in the ultrasound, we should have a sum of the differences, like let us say a thin and thick fluid like that. But at times very difficult to differentiate whether it is a only fluid or the blood. But if you correctly, you have told, if you have observed the medical MTP, the incidence of ectopic is gradually increasing with the medical MTP.
We had previous 2 cesarean sections also.
Yes, so that those are the also triggering factors. But if you want to see the literature also, for to start with, when medical MTP was started, initially there was no much, but maybe reporting was less. But nowadays the incidence has gradually increasing for the ectopic, following by the medical MTP.
No, the patient is fine. We had to do laparotomy because of previous 2 cesarean section. We did an open laparotomy. I did not dare to do a laparoscopy and not a laparoscopic surgeon, today being Sunday. So the patient is fine now, but the reports are very dicey.
Here one of the clue is that what is your opinion regarding, did you give a drain or not to previous cesarean? Did you give a drain, or you are satisfied with this?
We gave a drain. Drain is a must.
Yes, that is the recommendation. So I was telling that while delivering the ectopic, you see sac or the tube or the concern, the RPOC. So what you are doing whenever you are doing the laparoscopy, usually by extending the lateral port by the endobag or by the sponge holder, you can take it out. But in my practice, especially, I have developed that I do a coldotomy, even with 2 previous cesarean, then remove everything there, including fluid, after the lavage with the normal saline, and leave per se, but be sure that there is hemostasis is maintained, either from the laparoscopy wound and also from the outside through the pouch of Douglas by the speculum. Then leave it per se. And many of my postgraduate junior consultant ask, sir, they ask me when it closes, this visceral peritoneum. We know that the visceral peritoneum, even if you do not give stitch, it will close for say 24 hours. So for at least 24 hours, it will give a normal drain. So that it would a coldotomy, so every secretion will come out, so that no need of giving an extra drain. But I thank you very much. In a 2 previous cesarean ectopic, you have given a routine drain. That is also encouraged. Congratulating.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So thank you, sir. Now I'd like Dr. Lavina Chaubey, ma'am, to please enlighten us further with her experiences.
Okay. So can you hear me?
Yeah, Lavina.
Yeah. Dr. Tushar, would you like to take a question from my side?
Yeah, directly
thank
tell
you.
me.
So this is regarding a patient. She was 14 years old, unmarried, and she had a twisted ovarian, left side.
Yeah.
So she came in emergency, and then of course, because she was an emergency case and she was in pain, so we had to do a small mini laparotomy. And I found that the ovary on the left side was twisted, so I untwisted it. And after that, we found that part of the ovary started becoming pink again. So then we left the ovary. It was around maybe 7 to 8 centimeters, but the size also decreased. The edema had decreased and the ovary was turning pink. And then I reposited the ovary and I left the patient because she was only 14-year-old and she was unmarried. So 3 weeks later, she came again to our hospital. She was COVID positive at that time. She was admitted for her COVID management. So out of interest, we did another scan, and but the scan, it was repeated 2 or 3 times because every time it was showing that there was no flow in that ovary. But the patient was relatively asymptomatic. So she had a mild distension of the abdomen, but it was relieved, and then she was passing Flater stool. Everything was normal. And so now what is to be done for this ovary? Should we remove it or should we leave it? Because all the scans are showing that there is no flow in that ovary.
Yeah, that is one aspect, that no flow is till now. It is 2 to 3 weeks. But before that, you must evaluate the patient in the form of especially tumor marker, all the tumor marker, and again you re-evaluate by the imaging. Now,
yeah, we did a biopsy, sir. We did a biopsy, and the biopsy was non-malignant, and the tumor markers were normal.
All right, but what is the exact biopsy? What is the exact biopsy?
So the biopsy, yeah, the biopsy was just showing stromal element and blood clot.
Yeah, so it could be, we should think that it's a physiological cyst or a lutein cyst in the young 14 years.
Yeah.
So though it has come in the biopsy, still then we have to take the help of the tumor markers, all the tumor markers. So you have
the tumor markers were also negative. That is why
we had the size, Lavina.
Now the size, initially. Yes, initially before it was twisted, the size when she came before that, it was around 7 to 8 centimeters, and after we had untwisted it, the size became approximately it reduced by 1 centimeters in both. The volume had reduced, and the ovary had turned pink slightly. And the patient currently is not having any problem, but the scans are not showing any flow in that ovary. Now, 3 weeks after laparotomy, 3 or 4.
Do you think any inflammatory marker or things like genital tuberculosis in your mind?
Actually, she had a history of previous ATT intake, but that was around when she was a small kid. So, but when we had opened the case, it was completely normal. There was no adhesion, nothing. It was just a big cyst which had twisted, most likely a corpus luteum or something, a benign follicular cyst which had twisted. But the only problem with this case is now that because it is not showing any flow, so should the ovary be removed because she is only 14 years old?
If it is not showing
can I add
any flow,
that
is good.
Yeah,
because you think it will go under atrophy. You just wait for 3 months. You just wait for 3 months. Let us see what is going to happen. Or you can also think of giving Dimpa, Depo-Provera. If it exists, it may resolve by that only. And she is a young girl of 14. For such patients, I think Dimpa has got no harm in it.
Two things.
What do you think, Dr. Tushar?
So we should leave her and follow up the patient, and don't hurry to remove her ovary. She is symptomatic. Maybe slowly the blood flow will come up. So we have to wait and watch. And if she is symptomatic, then we will have to see.
So, Dr. Tushar, should we go in for a laparoscopy after some time, like Madam said, to wait for some time? Both Anuradha Madam and Sulekha Madam both are saying that we should wait for 3 months, 4 months. Should we do a laparoscopy after that?
No, straight away, look at it. The first thing is that there are 2 things. One is the retrospective things with the history of ATT. She has already taken ATT. So now first start with, while going for a laparotomy, you have gone. During that time, you should be genital tuberculosis minded. For that, we should have gone for a frozen biopsy. The second thing, in the laparotomy, now you have determined that, and you saw that the blood flow was there. So that's why you didn't go for a radical one. So in those cases, we should have gone for a cystectomy. We should have gone for a cystectomy, keeping the healthy portion of the cystectomy, total cyst. That is the recommendation. Now, even in a tuberculosis case, because he has got ATT, we should have gone for a cystectomy. But whatever happened, now it has already, you have done that. So now its follow-up is required after 3 months. So you just follow up. So after 3 months, if it reaches and if it remains like that, then you have to intervene accordingly, taking other aspect into consideration, whether you should go for a laparoscopy or not.
In such girls less than tumor 8 centimeter, 10 centimeter, usually without vascularity, they are benign, and possibility of tuberculosis is there. And you can see the ESR, CBC, and other markers of genital tuberculosis, whether she is having active tuberculosis or not. Sometimes they need repeat ATT also. You never know. Any other active lesion is there or not. But I also put this 14 years in Depo-Provera injection, 150 milligram, and that will suppress the hypothalamus pituitary part, and that let the time to resolve the ovarian cyst. And you have opened a very good discussion regarding the management of postmenopausal cyst. This is another very good topic, postmenopausal cyst. If it is there, it is less than 5 centimeter with all benign criteria, then better you wait. But if it is 5 centimeter above, even if it is a benign criteria, according to IATA classification, it should be operated. But you know, if I'm a patient and I'm having 4 centimeter cyst and I'm 65 now plus, when I see a cyst, I will be worried in spite of all the tumor markers normal. So this is a, I think, demand of a patient also. I remember many cases in which on asking the patient that madam 4 centimeter है, फिर 1 महीने बाद आपने अल्ट्रासाउंड कराया, अभी भी 4 centimeter है, so please निकाल दीजिए. So this is a demand of patient also. Yeah, and we have to think, but of course, if it is increasing in size, definitely we have to remove it. Yes, Dr. Tushar, you want to say something?
It reminds of me one series that which I have not added here. In the peripivotal age, let us say 14 years, I have got a good series, and usually they present with the torsion adnexa. And on laparoscopy, I have found surprisingly, which book doesn't mention also, literature is having insufficient data, that peritubular cyst or parovarian cyst. Majority of the cases are parovarian cyst. They undergo torsion. Maybe because of the small fallopian tube, and cyst become more, and it falls on the cavity, and then undergoes torsion. And these present with torsion adnexa. This is a surprising thing. And in my series, I have got around 20 cases of that.
Yeah. In ultrasound also, if you are getting TVS done, and if there's a sliding sign, then you can also differentiate between the paraovarian cyst and ovarian cyst.
Yeah.
That is the different thing. And it's very, very important while you are examining the patient. Divya, you are doing ultrasound and you are doing this test.
Yeah. Dr.
One
Tushar,
case of mine you have mentioned that it was a paraovarian. We diagnosed preoperatively. And I sent it to Divya and she manages beautifully. So this is the ultrasound tick that you come to know whether it is a paraovarian or ovarian, and it is very easy to manage then.
I want to congratulate Dr. Tushar sir for a very, very lucid presentation, and it almost covers to the part of adnexal mass. I just want to discuss one of my case. The patient was young and married almost 2 years back, and she presented with a large ovarian mass, and her CA24/5 was around 500 something. It was around 500 to 600 value, and everyone MRI was also done, and she was diagnosed to be as malignant. And the patient was sent to me for this, because I'm an ART specialist too. The patient was sent to me for this preservation of the oocytes. So basically I did the IVF, and then the embryo was frozen, and the patient was sent to the oncologist. And the oncologist took out the whole cyst, and the report came out to be endometrioma. That was very surprising. So I just wanted to know, what is the cutoff of CO135 when you think whether it is a malignancy or it is endometrioma?
Yeah. This is a very good question. Yes, you have seen my slides presentation. Always to my postgraduate and the practicing clinician, I always said that CA125 is because of the secretion from the mesothelium. All the viscera lined by the mesothelium are responsible for CA125. Example, lungs mesothelium, cardiac mesothelium, GI mesothelium, and also genital, that is ovarian mesothelium, even endometrium. So therefore, it is never a diagnostic criteria. Example, in normal women, in pregnancy, in endometriosis, in malignancy, epithelial tumor, in the female genital system, or CA125 increase. But if you have to differentiate, the CA125 level will be less increase, up to 100 in endometriosis, maybe at times 200 like that. But how we can determine? It is never a diagnostic criteria, only a prognostic criteria. Today you have treated endometriosis, either a medical surgical management. After 6 months, you evaluate whether the value is decreasing, or as an ART specialist, you evaluate in that line whether you can go for a induction ovulation or not, or whether you want to go for ART. So by that only you can know. So therefore, you should not be carried out by the CA125 level alone. You have to take the other clinical symptoms, imaging, and other tumor marker also into.
Actually, the MRI
Luma
also
index.
suggested malignancy. So that's
Luma
why.
index is very important, Divya. That's why I mentioned it. That HE4, that is human epididymal protein 4, that is very important in premenopausal age group, where you are getting confusion. You get this done, an ultrasound finding, and CA125 very low. Don't be getting, okay, it's fine. It's okay, it is because of the endometrioma. And in ultrasound, picture of endometrioma is very, very clear. We will just say, okay, go on ground glass, no vascular T, very minimal vascular T, and CA125, maybe even 1000. Don't bother. Just enucleate that cyst, and then you go for other things. And you have done very nice that you have used other ovary, and you have taken out the embryos. That is a good part of it, even for endometrioma management. No harm in it. But as Dr. Tushar said,
my
that
uncle expired just now because of the COVID. Just now, my own uncle, father, younger brother, expired just now because of the COVID. He was admitted, and he is allowed to leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We are so sorry, sir.
No,
Yes,
best wishes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you want to continue with discussion with others, I think Uma is waiting.
Yes, ma'am. There are some.
waiting.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Questions.
So we can go for discussion.
Yes, ma'am. There are some questions which have been asked in the chat box. Uma, ma'am, Dr. Uma Pandey, ma'am, has put a question in the chat box.
Actually, I wrote and I deleted, so I'll directly
Yes,
ask
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am, sir had in presentation, he had written in one slide that the septal thickness 2 to 3 millimeters, and in the next slide, it's 7. So usually we think it is 7. What is your opinion about that?
Septal thickness, if it is 2 millimeter to 3 millimeter without vascularity, is a benign feature. But if with vascularity, it is a malignant feature. And if it is 7 millimeter, even if it is not vascular, this is towards malignancy. The difference is this.
Got it. Thank you.
So you are clear.
Yes,
2 to 3 millimeter without vascularity is usually benign. 7 millimeter, even non-vascular, may be malignant.
Okay. Now, next.
One point. Isolated septal thickness, you have to consider the other features also. If there is any definition,
yes,
how many cysts, whether it is unilateral or bilateral, and if there is any other features, vascularity and all should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, but I read about this oncology thing before for a panel. I haven't read 2 to 3 millimeter. That's why I asked that question. Next question is, there are plenty of women in our outpatients who come with the ultrasound done in Ghazipur or Jaunpur or Buxar, which shows that there is an ovarian cyst. Obviously, it's functional. And then you explain that nothing is required and that woman is adamant. Then what do you do for that young woman? Do you prescribe just hematinics and calcium and befool them off home? Or do you explain them? I mean, sometimes I'm in trouble by being honest in the outpatients or with the people, I think.
What was the size you mentioned?
Like suppose if it's a 5 centimeters in a 25 years old woman who hasn't been married and has no complaint, but accepting that the ultrasound shows a cyst, and ultrasound was done for some surgical reason, not gynecological at all.
You have to take a detailed history menstrual, whether
Okay.
she is having cyclical bleeding or it is a like it is postponed. So
Okay.
if it is cyclical bleeding and she is having a 5 centimeter cyst and it is hypoic, not vascular, then you need not bother. You need not bother. You wait for another mens. And if she is having, so you said surgical, then surgical for what? Is it appendicular? It is a pain in abdomen. So think of tuberculosis also, because in tuberculosis it is thick, thick cortex, and in that you are likely to have this sort of functioning ovarian cyst. So don't bother. Don't bother.
Third question. He wrote in his slides regarding RMI1 and RMI2. Which one do you use? Because college says, RCOG says to use RMI1.
Yeah. So there are studies, not only 1, 2, 3, 4 also.
Yes.
That's what I mentioned.
Yes.
So they are still under confusion. That's why I said about the Roma.
Okay.
Roma is having CA125, NHE4, and your ultrasound finding and age. So this is very good in algorithm to manage instead of RMI1. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
This is still under the investigation.
Last question regarding Doppler. Which one we are supposed to be using color Doppler? What happens with the spectral Doppler and the pulse Doppler? Which one are we supposed to do for the ovarian cyst? Which in our institution I'm talking.
Pulse Doppler is very good.
Yeah.
And if you zoom with it, and actually you have to see the vascularity, the diameter, the thickness, and aberrant vessels, and presence of vessels in septa and the masses. So you zoom it and you see it. If it is pulse Doppler, that is of better index. Low PI is another indication of malignancy.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Khanna ma'am and Pandey ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for such nice questions and discussion. Ma'am, there is one more question in the chat box. Dr. Ghazal Jain has asked, what is the role of ATT in management of hydrosalpinx, and should all hydrosalpinx more than 5 centimeter be drained?
Can I answer?
Yes.
In a hydrosalpinx, it is the inflammation remnant of the inflammation. There is no active disease. And if she has already received the ATP, it's okay. But it is not going, ATP is not going to help her if there is a hydrosalpinx, because hydrosalpinx suffer destruction of the cilia and collection of the inflammatory fluid. So ATP is not going to help.
I will like to add in it that it is not only always hydrosalpinx because of tuberculosis or inflammation. It is also because of endometriosis. So in such cases, instead of starting ATT, if you give a syndromic approach of infection and it is not been resolving, or especially if she is a young girl without any history of contact, no history of STI, RTI, then it is better you go for laparoscopy. In such cases, having hydrosalpinx and diagnose whether it is a tubercular or it is a endometriosis or maybe both together. You see the ovaries also, and you can take the biopsy if you are suspecting tuberculosis or you are taking this endometriosis, and that will also help you. And why she is having hydrosalpinx? Is it what type of hydrosalpinx? If fimbria is blocked, at the same time you can open it up. So you have to take care what is the type of endometriosis, and you take the other investigations before you go for laparoscopy has already been discussed. CA 125, CBC, X-ray chest, and other thinking of Montu test. Maybe it is tubercular. X-ray chest will tell you. So keep both the possibilities in mind, that it may be tubercular, it may be endometriosis, maybe both. So, and in my under thesis has been done, in which we have done the collection of fluid from the cul-de-sac, and we have sent it for the review, and we have found that there were increased macrophages, activated macrophages, is also a sign of endometriosis. But also I have seen together with tuberculosis in some cases.
Thank you, ma'am.
I will like to have your comment also. Dr. Madhu Jain, please come. Dr. Madhu Jain, we'd like to see you also. Come. Please come. The king. Anyone other one like to comment on Dr. Madhu Jain's question? I have commented my part. What I have seen.
Ghazal Jain.
Dr. Ghazal Jain.
Ma'am, Dr. Ghazal Jain had asked that question.
Okay. I thought Dr. Madhu Jain said.
Dr. Ghazal Jain had. Thank you, ma'am. It was a wonderful discussion, ma'am. Even though Dr. Tushar sir had to leave the session early because of an unexpected demise in his family, but Dr. Anuradha ma'am and Dr. Sulekha ma'am and all the chairpersons, you nicely overtook the discussion and solved the queries of the people. Now I'd like to invite I'd like to share my screen and invite Dr. Mamta Rajan ma'am.
जूही,
प्रतीक जी आप शेयर कर सकते हैं क्या? स्क्रीन शेयर कर सकते
जूही,
हैं प्रतीक जी? Yes,
जूही,
ma'am.
रहने दो, मैं
Yes,
स्क्रीन शेयर रहने दो, मैं ऐसे ही खोल देती हूँ.
Ma'am, I want to invite Dr. Mamta Rajan ma'am. She is secretary of Varanasi Obs and Gynae Society.
Thanks,
To
Joey.
give the vote of thanks.
Okay, thanks, Joey. Good evening, everyone. Myself, Dr. Mamta, Secretary of Vox. First of all, I would like to thank our eminent speaker, Dr. Tusarkar sir, for giving an excellent talk on adnexal masses and enlightening us with their knowledge regarding diagnosis and management of adnexal masses at every age group. And it was full of knowledge. And a heartfelt thanks to our esteemed chairperson, Sulekha ma'am, Anuradha Khanna ma'am, Lavina ma'am, Madhulika ma'am, Archana Sa ma'am, for sharing their experiences and expert comments and solving the queries by audience. And big thanks to our audience, especially my Vox family, for joining and listening us. And thanks to Divya ma'am for organizing the webinar. And Juhi, thanks to you for moderating the session very beautifully. And thanks to Acumentis Pharma, Harmonica Division for technical support and groundwork. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Mamta,
Thank you,
for
ma'am.
both of us.
Thank you, Mamta. Thank you, Divya. Thank you, ma'am.
Divya, Mamta.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you all doctors.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee.
Divya ji, Divya ma'am.